Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. I'm making this video because I received a lot of discussion in my previous video, Ibn Ishaq in the Three, where if you haven't seen the video, please watch it, where I attempted to illustrate that it might not be the best idea for Muslims to take the doctrine of the Trinity as modern Christians understand it, or as apparently Orthodox Christians have understood it for centuries, and project the doctrine back onto verses in the Quran which appear to be polemical, or at least trying to correct the beliefs of the people of the book, specifically Christians. I did so because after watching debates between James White, reading his books on the subject, I found that to simply apply these specific texts to the doctrine of the Trinity might not be the best way to convince Christians that their beliefs are wrong, since if Christians look at the text, they don't really seem to think that the Quran is actually commenting on their specific beliefs and how they understand it. In other words, it's not speaking their language. Now, several people have taken exception to this, and I'm going to be, in this video, I'm going to be talking about comments that were left on my video, a video that was linked to me by Muslimbychoice. Told me to watch this video. I watched it. It's Dr. Shabir Ali, and I will be discussing what Shabir Ali says in a 2-minute video clip in due course. So I have several things to be talking about in this video. So if you want to pause the video now and go pop some popcorn and relax and get ready for this is probably going to be another 20-minute, half-hour video on the subject, responding to several people and several things that were said. Now, what I've noticed in the comment section, I'm going to start with two Muslims in the comment section that have been rather prominent in their repeated comments. One user, from what I can tell, this particular user, I don't know whether they're male or female, so I'm just going to say these users or this user, is saying that the Quran is referring to, or it may apply, again, there's that word again, may, or it might be applying to a specific group of Christians. So this is what this person is still trying to find a historical reference. There's some group in the history of Christendom and Christianity that the Quran is referring to. That's the take of one individual, and we'll be returning to that individual in a moment, because you see, I actually recorded this video right after Muslimbychoice linked me to Shabir Ali's the clip of Shabir Ali. And then right after I did that, I did a little research, recorded the video. Then I started getting these comments flooding in that were very similar to what Shabir Ali says in that clip. So then I went ahead and did more research and decided to delete the original version and then record this version, based on more comments, more discussion, and more research. So the other user in particular that I'm referring to, there's a second one who's been rather adamant on the comments section of the last video that I did, Ibn Ishaq in the Three, is doing a classic tactic, which I believe a lot of people do when they're faced with I mean, I'm not going to analyze the individual, but there are cognitive terms for this. But when you have to jettison something in order to, when you're faced with the reality that something is in error. In this particular context, I'm referring to the tafsirs. I find this fascinating because this individual is basically implying that I shouldn't look at the tafsirs with regards to interpreting the Quran. I mean, that's how I take this person's comment. And if I use their standards, because both these users have basically been saying, well, if this thing's in error, if this is wrong, how could we trust anything? And yada, yada, yada. Well, I guess I can say the same thing for the tafsirs now, right? I'm going to quote the person verbatim, and then briefly talk about the nature of tafsir as far as how I find this sort of methodology problematic. And then I'm going to go on to the heart of the video, which is found in the Shabir Ali clip, and also with several comments and articles that I found online. Again, the theme is Muslim understanding of the Trinity, and how one can understand it, and what are the sources of understanding it. That is sort of the point of this video and the previous video, and maybe the video right before it as well. So to quote the user, he says, or she, appealing to tafsirs who came centuries after is nothing more than appealing to authority. All these tafsirs are centuries afterwards from the Prophet's time. Jalaluddin's tafsir was composed in 1459, Tafsir Ibn Kathir was done in the 1300s, and Tafsir al-Mikbas was not done by Ibn Abbas himself, as the name suggests. It is a later tafsir. If the tafsir writers thought that all the Christians believed the Trinity to be such, that just goes on to show their lack of knowledge of the Christian faith, nothing else, end quote. So this person is basically saying that, hey, of all these tafsirs, as I illustrated in the last video, if you look at all the tafsirs that comment on Surah 4, verse 171, about don't say three, right? Stop it. It would be better for you, for your Lord is one Lord, your Lord is one God, or there's only one Allah, different translations. If you look at these tafsirs, they're all saying that the Trinity is Allah, Jesus, and the Virgin Mary. So this person is saying, look, these tafsirs were done way later, way later. Basically he or she is alluding to the idea that they're in error. That they have, I will quote again, their lack of knowledge of the Christian faith. But to be fair, the user then says at a different place in the comment section, I personally do not believe the interpretations of the tafsir writers you quoted. However, I still won't say they are wrong. Firstly, there's little known of the different Christians outside of the Roman Empire, and particularly Arabia. And secondly, there's proof of Christians who believe in different trinities. Okay. And so I'm really confused by that in particular, because this person is basically saying that, so these scholars who say that the Trinity is this idea, that there's Virgin Mary, Allah, and Jesus, that they're in error, but he's not going to say that they're wrong, which I thought was kind of weird, a weird way of putting that. Maybe he's saying that they're wrong about this interpretation, but they're not wrong about every single thing that they ever wrote in their tafsir. I guess that's one way of putting it. So, having said that, let's move on. I just want to point that out, that was rather confusing to me, because when I was a Muslim apologist, I would quote the tafsirs all the time. Any of you who watch my videos, I would say, hey, look at the interpretations. Hey, look at the interpretations. Hey, look at the interpretations. And I never once had a Muslim tell me, that I can recall, hey Ozzy, you might not want to quote the tafsirs. They contain things in there that aren't, 100% accurate. Never had that. Never had that. It's only until recently that I've had people like this say to me, they had lack of knowledge in some of these things, so that some of, maybe aspects of it is incorrect. I find that very, very interesting, because a lot of Muslims I know go to the commentary, go to the tafsir, and encourage other people to do the same, right? So I don't know, I find that very fascinating, that this person's basically jettisoning the tafsirs in this context, and saying, no. Okay. I'll deal with the person's other comments in a moment, because I don't want to take them out of context. He then goes on to say, Muslim historian Ibn Isham mentions a sect, al-Babaraniya, who believed in Jesus, peace be upon him, and his mother as God. And he quotes a book written by Ibn Hazm. And so I'll return to that in a moment. What I want to do, though, is deal with the clip that Muslimbychoice originally posted on my comment section, because this ties into a number of comments made by another user who is repeating what Shabir Ali says. So I'm pulling up the video right now. I'm going to play it, and you should be able, because I looked at the recording, my original version, you'll be able to hear the audio of Shabir Ali. And if someone can't, please let me know, and I'll somehow clarify, like in a separate video, but you should be able to hear it. So I'm pulling up the video now. This is a debate between Shabir Ali and Dr. Anish Sharosh, and this happened a while back, and this is a 2-minute, 34-second video of Shabir Ali answering the question about, the title of the video is, did the Quran get the Trinity wrong? Imam Shabir Ali answers. So here we go. Coming up now.
And the first question we have here for Mr. Ali is that can you explain where the Quranic idea of Trinity comes from? How does it match with the Christian concept?
Should I start? Sure. Well, the Quran is obviously in dialectic discussion with people at the time when the Quran was first revealed. So naturally it responds to the ideas and the teachings which people had at the time and which the Quran needs to correct. And so whereas people believed in a concept that had Mary on equal par with God, such as the Maryamites, the Quran responds to that. The Quran doesn't say that Jesus ever told anyone this. The Quran is asking Jesus, did you teach this in the presence of the people so as to bring them to judgment? To show them that it is not Jesus who taught them this, because Jesus will in fact disclaim any responsibility for their incorrect ideas. At the same time, the Quran, in speaking about the concepts, put things in such a way that it seems to include, in the opinion of many Muslim scholars, also the beliefs that Christians hold today.
Okay, so I want to pause there. This is at the halfway point. I want to say that I want to divide this video at this exact moment, minute 1 and 11 seconds, out of 2 minutes and 34 seconds. I want to divide the video into two halves. The first half is Shabir talking about historical peoples, like when the Quran was first revealed. The latter half is when he jumps into the modern interpretation that Bassam Zawidi does when he debates Dr. James White. Very similar argumentation. Okay, there's two phases to this response. The first part, though, I find very fascinating for two reasons. One, Shabir Ali says that the Quran is dialectic. In other words, it is dialoguing. It's talking to the people of the time that it was revealed. And it is commenting on their beliefs. It is correcting their beliefs. That I find very fascinating because then, again, a critical reader will ask the questions, which Christians during the time of the Prophet Muhammad believed in the beliefs that the Quran is saying they believe in? Who believed during the 7th century in Arabia? Which Christians believed as the Quran says they disbelieved? You know, which Christians that the Prophet would be speaking to believed that Mary was divine, that was a god, right? That she may have been a member of the Trinity, as some of the interpreters say the Quran is referring to. Which Christians would believe this? And we find no historical evidence, concrete historical evidence, to say that when the Prophet Muhammad spoke to any Christian during the 7th century, they would have believed exactly as the Quran says they believed. Hardly at all. As I mentioned in the previous video, when Ibn Ishaq is telling the story of the Christians who were of the Byzantine Rite, we know what Eastern Orthodox Christians believed, and there are several things that Ibn Ishaq records that I dare say Byzantine Christians, Eastern Orthodox Christians, would not believe. They would not have characterized their belief in the way that he records it. So again, I find that very problematic, if we're just going to take that the Quran is talking to people during this time. Now, he then mentions, Shabir Ali mentions, a sect called the Maryamites. Fascinating, because I had never heard this before. I've actually watched this debate between him and Anna Sharosh. It's been a while. Can't say I can remember everything that I've heard, but the Maryamites, and when I watched this clip, I went, the Maryamites? Who were those people? So I quickly did some online searches, and religion encyclopedias. I checked my comparative religion texts. I have several textbooks, several encyclopedias done by major publishers of the field, and could not find a single reference to a group called Maryamites. The only place that I could find a reference to the Maryamites was in two online articles. One was by AnsweringIslam.org, which I found to be very ironic. The title of it being Mary and Triunity, and it was a response to IslamicAwareness.org. So obviously IslamicAwareness.org must have mentioned Maryionites as well for this to come up in a Google search. The other article is from answering-bibleca.weebly.com, and it's rebuttal to Bible.ca, Mary was not part of the Christian Trinity. Okay, these are the two articles that pop up when you Google Maryamites. All right, there might be a few discussions happening in Islamic forums, but what was absent from all of the Google searches I did was any academic journal, comparative religion, scholarly text, an academic text from a Christian, or a Muslim for that matter, or a Jew, or any scholar of religion. Nothing. Crap detector went off right there when I saw that. Okay. So let's just assess. This is a segue, so please bear with me. Again, if you need to pause this, go use the restroom or go pop some more popcorn. I completely understand. But let's segue into analyzing the two articles in question regarding the Maryamites. Because why is this important? Well, it's not just important because Shabir Ali said it. Remember earlier when I said that there were two users who were commenting on my previous video and how they one was talking about historical persons or historical groups, the other one was just jettisoning tafsirs left and right. This particular user said two comments that I want to now quote as it is now relevant to the topic at hand. The user said, quote, "The Quran calls Christians of that time by the term Nasara, which may apply to the Maryamites, depending on the verse. They took Mary as a god." See the verse, chapter 4, verse 171, so the verse 4:171 is referring to all Christians in general by declaring do not say three, and verse 5:116 is referring to the Maryamites, two separate groups. Second comment. The Quran doesn't condemn those Christians for taking Mary as a Trinity member, but only as a god. It doesn't even say, quote, "do not say three gods," chapter 5, verse 116, but simply, "do not say three." So how could it accuse Christians of worshiping Mary as one of the three gods? It only condemns them for individual worship of Mary besides Jesus. This sect was called, and then he puts in huge capital letters, Maryamites. Or excuse me, just in all caps. Maryamites. Who are the Maryamites? Where are people getting this from? I can find no academic source, legitimate academic source, that discusses the Maryamites. So now, because this is not just Shabir Ali, I mean, these are other people parroting this claim. Let us look at now what AnsweringIslam.org says in response to Islamic awareness. I'll post these all in the more description section because I don't have a lot of time. This is already going to be a long video, so I'm not going to read the whole article to everyone. It's already 18 minutes in. But I want to read what it says, the relative passages, because I just went, command find, and to find Maryamites. The person points out something very interesting, because this is what is done by another user, which the author of Answering Islam says. He goes on to cite, meaning the author of Islamic Awareness, the writings of Reverend W.S. Clare Tisdale, George Sale, and Edward Gibbons to build up an argument that there are a number of heretical Christian groups in Arabia which may have believed in the divinity of Mary. Okay? Then the author of Islamic Awareness says, this notion of the divinity of the Virgin Mary was also believed by some of the Council of Nicaea, but who said that there were two gods besides the Father, Christ and the Virgin Mary, and were thence named Maryamites. End quote. Really? At the Council of Nicaea, there were some people called Maryamites? Then, the author of Answering Islam comes to the same conclusion that I came to, which was, there is no group of Christians called the Maryamites. There's a Christian group in Lebanon called the Maronites, but they take their name from Saint Maronis and not Mary. Okay, then the Islamic Awareness says, quote, it is pretty clear that whether the Holy Trinity composed of the Father, Jesus, and Mary, or the Father, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are equally condemned in the Quran, any association of partners with God is unacceptable. And then the Islamic Awareness goes on to say, so there existed a sect in Arabia which called Mary a goddess, and included her in the Godhead, along with the Father and Jesus. End quote. Where? Where's your evidence for this? Where is it? I really want to know. Where is the evidence for this? And I'll link this in the more description section. I can't find any evidence for this outside of these articles. Let's go on to the next section, which is the rebuttal to Bible.ca. Mary was not part of the Christian Trinity. This is really interesting because, again, here we have this. This person is quoting the Christian writer as saying, the Quran represents Christians are worshiping Mary as a third member of the Trinity, when in fact the only one worshiping Mary, based on the record of history, were the pagan Arabs who worshipped her idol in the Kaaba and a small heretical sect of Christians in the Mecca area. Excuse me. Obviously, then Muhammad believed that this sect, and then, end quote. This person said, then the Muslim author says, the sect Brother Andrew is referring to as pagan Arabs are the Caladrians, who worshipped Mary as a goddess. But sadly, Andrew have not done proper research, or he would have come across a sect called the Maryamites, who had a trinity that consisted of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I think they meant to say, the Father, the Son, and the Mother, I think, because again, there's a reference to these Maryamites. This is just fascinating to me, because again, what Maryamites? Who are we talking about? And then he goes on to talk about some of the other things we talked about. Funny enough, when I read this article, I realized that another person, the other user who was commenting on my comment section, basically either is the author of this article, or he just took quotes from this article and reposted them on my comment section. Because when I scroll down again, he quotes the following things. The Muslim historian Ibn Hazm mentions a sect, al-Babaraniya, who believed in Jesus and his mother as God. Christian scholar George Sales writes, quote, the notion of the divinity of the Virgin Mary was also believed by some of the Council of Nicaea, who said there were two gods besides the Father, Christ and the Virgin Mary, and were hence named Maryamites. Oh, interesting. Similarly, John William Draper writes, the Maryamites regarded the Trinity as consisting of God the Father, God the Son, and the Virgin Mary. The Caladrians worshipped the Virgin as a divinity, offering her sacrifices of cakes. Okay? All of those references can be found on this article. When I actually started quoting these keywords, I found other Muslim articles that are basically just repeating the same exact thing, because here it is. For your enjoyment, you can go read this yourself. Again, there's the quote from George Sales, John William Draper, and also the mention of Ibn Hazm. Okay, what's fascinating is that I can't find any reference to Maryamites anywhere outside of these random quotations. Anywhere. There's no academic source for this. Now someone might argue, well, Ozzy, isn't George Sale and John William Draper and Ibn Hazm, aren't they reputable people? Shouldn't we just be able to close the books on this whole discussion and go, oh, boom, got it, that's it? Well, I'm not going to say that George Sale and William Draper are nobodies, but what I will say is, what's their source material? How do they know that? For George Sale to say that there were people at the Council of Nicaea who said that there were two gods besides the Father, Christ, the Virgin Mary, we have documentation of what was said at the Council of Nicaea. There are multiple Christian historians who talked about what was done at the Council of Nicaea, what was believed, what was the outcome, who was there, what their varying beliefs were. Is there any mention of Maryamites by Eusebius, the Christian historian? Not to my knowledge. So if that's where this comes from, are these few quotes, there's no outside source to collaborate this at all. There's not. Okay. And also, with regards to Ibn Hazm, I found an article, and I'll put this in the more description, in the more info section as well. An article written by an individual it's a journal, actually, World Journal of Islamic History and Civilizations. Here's an academic source. Ibn Hazm on Christianity, an analysis to his religious approach. In this article, it's a summary of Ibn Hazm's methodology and his comparative religion practices. I read the whole thing, tried to see where Ibn Hazm talks about the Trinity. Nowhere in here is Mary mentioned as being part of the Trinity. Now, to be fair, maybe this is just a bad summary. maybe the reference to Ibn Hazm said, such and such about the Trinity. Ibn Hazm also mentions a sect called Al-Babaraniya who believed in Jesus and his mother as God, meaning the Trinity. Maybe this article that I found that summarizes Ibn Hazm's views on Christianity, maybe it was just a bad summary. I'm willing to admit that. That's why I've ordered a translation of Ibn Hazm's direct text on his comparative religion methodology. Don't know when it's going to get here. Probably make a video once I read it. But I find it fascinating that Ibn Hazm also mentions some of these sects, and we can't find any information about the groups he talks about. The author of the article about Ibn Hazm even admits that. The author actually says, look, he talks about certain groups, but we don't have any, but they're extinct. So we have but there's no corroborative evidence to say, oh, this, for sure, this group believed in this. Funny enough, he mentions a few groups, but none of them say the Trinity is the Virgin Mary, Jesus, and Allah. None of them. Ibn Hazm says nothing about these groups believing that. So again, just because you can find a few people who say something doesn't mean that it's true. It's called critical thinking. It's called thinking outside the box, asking questions like, well, what's the sources of these people? Where do they get their information from? Is this substantiated by anybody else? Can you find this in any basic academic research regarding comparative religion? And so far, the answer is no. I can't find anything about this. With regards to the group called the Caladrians, this is fascinating because, again, I'll link the Wikipedia article to this because the sect was mentioned in some of these articles that I've been running across. They were considered to be a heretical movement that believed that Mary was divine. However, what's fascinating is that they were women, a group of women in a largely pagan Arabia who synchronized indigenous beliefs, indigenous pagan Arab beliefs with the worship of Mary. But there's no mention of them being around during Muhammad's time, nor is there any mention of them believing that she was a member of the Trinity. So again, I don't know where the parallel is. This is rather confusing. So, again, I find this really troubling. I find this troubling on so many levels. The main level is people are just not asking the question, what's the source material of the random article that they read online? Before you regurgitate information, all you have to do is simply spend some time on the computer or in a library, your face in a book, and research. And I know we're all busy. Not all of us are big nerds like me, who have a passion for this stuff, and who want to understand the beliefs of others and how beliefs are characterized by others and understood. Not everyone has time for that, so I understand how someone probably did what I did. You just Google Maryamites, and you find this random article, but what's so weird is that this whole article is almost reproduced in several different articles by other Muslim websites without any question of, is any of this true? For George Sale to say that there were Maryamites at the Council of Nicaea, what are his sources? What are his sources? How do we know? How does he know that? Who is he quoting? Who's John William Draper quoting? I want to know that. And who is Ibn Hazm referring to? Ibn Hazm, from what I can tell, made no mention of any group believing that, any Christian group that believed that Jesus or that God was made up of three persons, that was the Father, the Son, and the Mother. I find no reference to that at all. I'll find out when I get his translation of his book in due course, but for right now, I can't find any evidence of this at all. Let alone any reference to any of the sects that he mentions in his text that's mentioned in the article about him. Can't find any outside corroborative evidence for any of these groups. Now, I'm going to say that Ibn Hazm was a liar? No, I'm not going to say that. I have respect for Ibn Hazm. I had respect for him back when I was studying the Zahiri school of fiqh. I have the utmost respect for Ibn Hazm. But what I'm finding a theme is that a lot of medieval Muslims had a lot of misunderstanding about Christian beliefs. That's what I'm finding. And funny enough, some of these modern Muslims are now informing me, well, yeah, the interpreters, they didn't really know about Christian beliefs. Well, if that's the case, then was Ibn Hazm correct about his research about Christian theology? I don't know. But so far, He in this particular article, he didn't say anything incorrect. He references certain groups, but I can't find any outside evidence for them. So again, I want to make two very huge points here before anyone confuses me, accuses me of certain things here. There are two major points I'm trying to make. Point number one, I want to say that I don't believe in the Orthodox Christian view of the Trinity. I don't believe it, personally. I don't view God in that way. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that because I'm spending now 3 videos total discussing this topic, that somehow I believe in it, I'm defending it on a personal level. I'm not. I'm not trying to earn brownie points with the Christians either, by the way. I am simply looking at the comparative element of this topic and wondering where is the authentic discussion from an Islamic thinker or Muslims projecting the Trinity back onto these verses. Where's the authenticity in that? That's my first point. The second point is I find that so far the only Muslim, and I will link the articles again, the only Muslim that I can find who authentically engaged in the doctrine of the Trinity was Sheikh al-Akbar ibn Arabi. He was the only one. Another medieval scholar who tried to understand the Trinity and actually said positive things about it and made no reference to the Quran in his discussion of the Trinity, at least in the quotes that I have from this one particular scholarly academic journal. So that's where we're left. Those are the two big points I want you all to take away from this. Or maybe if I can add a third, that we all need to become better critical individuals. Oh, and before I forget, I just looked at all my tabs I have open here. Let's finish off the Shabir Ali video. Remember, he just talked about the Maryamites and how the Quran was in dialogue with Christians at the time. Let's finish off the video to be fair to Shabir Ali.
Christians would generally say that God is 3 in 1, and the Quran is saying La taqulu thalatha, do not say 3. So if you drop the 3, you'll be left with the 1. From the Quranic perspective, that is the original teachings. At the same time, there were some people who thought that Jesus is God himself, that is God who has actually come down. And they expressed that belief by saying, Inna Allah huwa al-Masih, that God is the Messiah. Now, generally, Christian theologians won't put it in this sense, at least in the mainstream Christianity today. But at the same time, when the Quran has called on Christians to understand truly who Jesus is, and that he's a servant and messenger of God who worship God, and we can see that from the Bible as well, the Quran is calling on Christians in general to recognize that there's only one true God, and that Jesus is the servant and messenger of that one God.
Okay, so again, this is the second part of the video. I divided up Shabir Ali's response into 2, as I mentioned earlier. One is the more historical understanding of the text. The other one is now him saying, well, look, the Quran is just saying to people, don't say 3, don't do this, that, and the other. God is only one, and Jesus is just a servant, etc. I had a few people leave me comments where they were saying stuff like, look, the Quran is just saying, it doesn't have to go into specifics. It's just saying, don't say this, don't say that, only believe God's like this, etc., etc., etc. And again, as I said, if Muslims want to just say, look, the Quran's just telling us, don't do things this way, don't believe in things this way, I don't think I'd have an actual, there would be no issue. But again, critical-minded people are going to ask the question that I'm asking and other people are asking, and that something that people have a hard time getting away from, which is, who was the audience? Did they believe what the Quran is saying? That's something that's up for debate. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. Is it right to project what we know now about the doctrine of the Trinity and Christian beliefs back onto the Quranic text? Or is the Quran simply just referring to some sort of idea, some sort of theological construct that mainstream Orthodox Christians actually don't believe in? If we take Ibn Arabi's opinion, the Trinity is monotheism. It's a different form of monotheism, but it is monotheism. And it's not to be condemned. However, if we take what a lot of Muslims are saying, the Trinity is shirk, it's polytheism. That's the big debate here. So, I think in closing, I will probably make another video where I just look at what does the text of the Quran actually say? What does it say? And if you take all the verses about Jesus and Mary and the condemnation and the polemics about the Christian beliefs and put them all together. What do they all say together? I think that that's the next step, is to logically do that and see what's the picture we get from all of the verses together on this one particular subject. So we'll probably do that next. But I know I've said a lot. This is a 35-minute video. Sorry again if you had to take breaks. I completely understand. Or if you got tired of this and are even hearing these words. Thank you for sticking with me. And I hope this will cause more discussion. But I think we need to start asking very serious academic. We need to take the discussion to the next level. And I know that might be a tall order, being on the internet. But we shouldn't just stop with like, oh, let me just quote these random articles and just take from articles and not ask the question, where did they get their information from? Where is that, the person who you're quoting, where do they get their information from? Is their information even accurate? Because so far, the past two videos I've done, every time someone says, oh, well, you might want to look at this person, I think they're a better scholar, or you might want to look at, it doesn't serve their argument. None of this has served their argument to try and convince me that that the information I presented is in error. In fact, it's actually increased the conversation in the direction of being very critical on this information and questioning this information. So let us try and be as academic as possible and try and find information so we can better understand this topic together. Thank you all for watching. Peace be with you all.